the issue or the topic I would like you to kind of describe is how you understand the term suffering, because I had an interesting discussion with Johnny, and it set me on track of what do people actually mean when they use the word suffering. For instance, I took the Webster's Encyclopedic Dictionary, and it says the first one is to undergo or feel pain or distress. And then there are different variations on that topic, like sustained injury, blah, blah. And then I hear basically that if you go to the original Buddhist teaching, it means basically that you're separate from your true self. So you have a kind of a psychological and a physical and spiritual definition, and how to relate to that. And I mean, there are, and what particularly set me on this was a sentence that I've seen several times quoted, like pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And there is of course some truth to that, in that we can create sufferings, more suffering for ourselves by whining about our current situation or whatever. So I would like you to, if possible, within this time we have here, kind of a good definition on how to relate to suffering, and including this, that there's suffering in the body and suffering in the psyche, and how to it appears that there are different ways how to look at this. And there's one more thing that also made me kind of really wonder, is that Thich Nhat Hanh appears to, even though he's a Buddhist, he appears to talk about suffering in a very wide way. That, I remember, for instance, when he talked about the four Brahmaviharas, or whatever it's called, he
yes.
said something to the effect that some people love the smell of durian fruit, and I can't stand that smell. So if you give me that fruit, I will suffer, something to that. So this means obviously that his smelling sense is giving him some unpleasant experience. And this is what he calls, in that specific situation, he calls it suffering as well. So I'm trying to find out with this topic what is suffering, and how do we define it, and how do we relate to it coming from a spiritual viewpoint.
Right. Yeah, and yes, that's a profound question. And yes, we could do a whole webinar on that. In a sense, literally, you could say that everything we're talking about is an exploration of that question. It is sort of like, Buddha's Four Noble Truths started with truth number one, the truth of suffering, the reality that dukkha, which is that, sort of, I think it's a Pali term and that's a very universal definition of suffering. And the first noble truth is that suffering's inherent in samsaric existence. But then the cause of suffering is the second noble truth. And then the third noble truth is that the opposite of suffering. So in a sense, the entire Dharma, and then the fourth noble truth is, how to cultivate this opposite of suffering, this nirvana, this freedom from suffering. So you might say that the entire Dharma is examining these two principles of nirvana and suffering, right? And how to distance ourselves from the suffering, stop causing suffering, and to cause nirvana instead, to cultivate the conditions for the realization of nirvana. So literally, in a sense, the entire path is the study of, in part, equal parts nirvana and everything that moves us towards nirvana, spiritual qualities and wisdom and so on, practice, and suffering and everything that moves us towards suffering. So what then is suffering? Well, like you suggested, it's a huge topic, and I won't try to bite off a very big chunk right now. But one thing I would say is that at a very experiential level, it's simply, the experience of, and then fill in the blank. There's many different things we could say, but I would say it's a feeling of unpleasantness, of lack of satisfaction, of discontent. There's even many different kinds of suffering, so we could arrange suffering according to different planes. There's mental suffering, there's emotional suffering, there's physical suffering. I think very often when people use this thing where they say, well, you can't get away from pain, but suffering is optional. I think what they're doing there is they're saying, well, the astral mental suffering is optional, but the physical pain, we're going to use semantically, we're going to say, use pain to designate physical stuff. And but some, and I can appreciate that, because to some extent I think it's true, and there's a sort of a way in which the arising of physical pain is so deeply imprinted in our bodies that it's difficult to overcome that. So it's more likely that our inner peace is going to come from accepting the existence of physical pain rather than trying to overcome it. But we can remove our reactions to it, and causing further pain, layering pain on top of pain, or suffering on top of pain, or what have you. But it is actually true, people, the teachings do say that if you bring nirvanic, non-dual, God-conscious realization down into the body more and more intimately at advanced stages of practice, you can actually uproot the physical pain as well. So that even that's not necessary. You'll still feel a kind of compassionate pain, like a sympathy with other beings and their samsaric suffering, but you won't yourself identify with it in the sense of, saying, oh, I'm a separate being that's having this suffering. It's a different kind of compassion, is different. But the other type can be profoundly uprooted so that the body becomes flooded with a radical sense of bliss and peace that's so comprehensive and you can be so in harmony with the Tao that you don't stub your toes anymore. You're just flowing so nicely with the nature of reality, even on a natural level of the seasons and the environment that you're in and everything, that you just don't have injuries happening and things like that. When we do see that in great souls, it's usually because of a moment of lapse where, there's a famous story where Kudhumi was making fun of the Tibetan because he whacked his head on a beam because he was walking along inside of a structure in Tibet. And at the same time, he was in telepathic rapport doing something with somebody. And so he wasn't kind of multitasking very well. He was mainly, and so he was walking along, but mainly doing this other thing, and he hit his head on something and drew some blood. And Kudhumi was poking fun at him for, bonking his head on something. So stuff like that can happen, but if you have like a radically profound, integrated, superconscious, blissful consciousness into your body, I think even the physical pain is largely overcome. And so, anyways, that's just to point out that even that distinction isn't probably necessary. But in practical terms on the path, it's very useful because there are parts of pain, especially physical pain, that are going to be a lot more difficult to avoid. But ultimately, even that can be overcome. So for me, any kind of, there's all kinds of suffering. Anything that arises, suffering is caused by frustrated desires. So as long as you have a desire, the sensation of even having the desire, because the rising of the desire not only can give rise to this desire that then gets frustrated at a story level, but the having of it means you don't feel complete. And that's inherently painful too. So dukkha has a very deep core of sense of dissatisfaction, because if you enter into the state of saying a narrative, a deep, core narrative in your being of saying, I'm not okay the way I am. I need to get things. I need to have certain conditions. I need to get away from some things and move towards other things. I need certain environments, certain kinds of people, certain kinds of internal, emotional, or psychological states. Any conditions we set up that way immediately lead to a type of intrinsic suffering, where we're disconnected from our true nature, and we're generating a narrative that says you're not whole now. It's conditional. And of course, when things go against our attractions and our aversions, we not only want things, but we want to not have certain conditions arise. Anything that violates our perception that those are being fulfilled, it will lead to suffering. And then so there's both the intrinsic feeling of it, like, what does it feel like? It's unpleasant. And then there's the particular story, and there's millions of stories. There's millions of variations on the different kinds of desires and aversions we can have, and what we're telling ourselves about what's happening in our lives. Because it's not just having the desire, it's the narrative that we're experiencing. We can think that somebody's betrayed us and get into a big emotional storm, and then suddenly get the information from them that they didn't betray us, and it all evaporates. And we're like, okay, different narrative. It's mostly in our heads what we think is the story. So by changing the narrative and let going of the desires and aversions, or at a more fundamental level, just let going of the sense of a separate self, then we can overcome that sense of dissatisfaction, of alienation, of aloneness, of discontentedness, and all the different permutations that it takes. So I know that's not, as complete an answer as we could do, but that's the gist. Does that work?
Yeah, I would just like you to make it clear that from what you said now, it's if we take physical suffering, like not like I got some insect stung me, but a real proper, so to speak, very uncomfortable conditions in the body, like strong pains or something like that. Are you saying that you need to be more like a fourth or third or fourth initiate in order to transcend that?
The pain part of it? Like physical pain?
Not wanting to, if the natural reaction to pain will be that the body, you will say something is wrong here, so it feels uncomfortable in that sense. And even though you could try to look at it and see, okay, I will accept that this physical pain is here, and then something else happens, the telephone's ringing, or you're reading something or something, and then which distracts you from that, then you will find out that well, when I'm focusing on this, I can kind of not react to it, but when I'm not focusing on it, I will subconsciously have an aversion, so to speak, to the physical pain, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, if this is addressing your question, I think it's possible to have a deep enough superconscious state that you can do both at the same time. You can maintain a deep state of presence where you're not engaged in that which would cause pain.
But I was trying to find out where are we talking? Are we
what
third
stage?
or fourth initiate, or where are we?
Well, probably generally to really have that integrated in a profound way, probably at least the fourth, And then the fourth would be challenged by conditions where sometimes they could hold it and sometimes they couldn't. In ordinary day-to-day life conditions, they'd be fine. But if they got, say, a big disease, they might slip out of it. But as you get to higher initiations, like a 6th degree initiate that's very deeply integrated it into their bodies, then yeah, they would not be inclined to fall out of that state regardless of what they were doing. But they were multitasking or difficult conditions arose or whatever, it would still be a radical, because when non-dual realization is so deeply integrated, everything that's arising, even pain, is perceived as Buddha nature, as God, as another face of God. So it gets transformed into something else. So if it's suffering, it gets transformed into compassion. And you don't feel like I'm suffering, that's not the story anymore, or that, oh, this is too bad, this is happening, or can we really call that suffering anymore? It's compassion. It's a different thing.